Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and can I rant to you about Modern Warfare for a bit? Because I want to rant to you about Modern Warfare for a bit. For those of you who don't know, I am actually a really big fan of Call of Duty, at least I was back in the day. I loved the original Modern Warfare trilogy. It got worse over every individual entry, it absolutely got worse, but even at the end of Modern Warfare 3, I still had a fair bit of goodwill for the series, which unfortunately went right out the window. If I'm being honest, my favourite multiplayer experience in Call of Duty was the original Black Ops, which is really bizarre considering how far the series seems to have gone downhill since then. But we're going to talk to you about the Modern Warfare reboot because it's an entirely interesting concept. It's probably one of the first times that they've actively tried to reboot a series inside the Call of Duty series. It's a little weird, but they had a lot of interesting things going in. And I found myself thinking that this might actually be a good time. So I bought it. I have the physical copy sitting on my desk, and I put it into my PlayStation 4, which might be a little bit weird considering that you're actually seeing keyboard prompts. Because you are actually able to play on PS4 with keyboard and mouse, and not only does that work, but it will match you cross-play with PC players most of the time, which actually puts you at a disadvantage because you can't do things like turn up the field of view or have a higher frame rate. I was playing this on 120Hz monitor, but I was only getting 60 because PlayStation 4, but there you go. So the footage in the background is going to be a combination of keyboard and mouse and controller gameplay, and both work fine, basically. I've got no real issues with either of them. Very loud bird chirping going on outside. I will apologise for the volume of the individual clips in this video. I'm working out a slightly new recording footage setup, so I was having a little bit of trouble working out the audio volumes, especially since, considering that I had to move my keyboard and mouse to my PS4, I wasn't actually able to adjust the audio on the fly particularly easily. But yeah, the clips of the volume in the game itself are going to be a little different from clip to clip. I tried my best to equalize them, but a couple of them just might be a little bit off when it comes to the actual volume of the clips, and I do apologize for this. So with that said, let's get to talking about it. It's got a bunch of stuff in the options menus that I would like to talk about. I don't have them here, unfortunately, but it's got a bunch of things that I do approve of. Like, even on console, you can do things like turn off motion blur, which, again, I really appreciate. I believe I also brought that up when I was talking about the gunfight alpha. There's going to be some gunfight footage in this video later on, I promise you that much. There are a lot of things going on there that I appreciate. There's plenty of options for sensitivity, plenty of options for color blindness. It basically just has a really solid set of customizable options for anyone who wants to play it, basically. And I appreciate that sort of thing. With that said, though, let's get on to the way the game is actually distributed. Now, this is really annoying because, yeah, you get the disc, right? Now, this isn't a problem on the PC version. However, this is a problem on the PS4 version. I assume the Xbox One version, but I'm not going to claim to know anything about the Xbox One version. But I got the physical disc. 50 gigs straight off the disc onto the hard drive. Like, no problem whatsoever, right? Then the day one patch was about 57 gig. A bit big, but also, like, not really a problem. Then, in order to play Spec Ops, I had to install another 10 gigabyte and yet another 2 gigabyte downloadable DLC. And unfortunately, these were locked in my region. For those of you who don't know, I'm actually playing on a North American PlayStation Network account, and I bought an Australian copy of the game because I'm Australian. So when I put it into my thing and I went to play Spec Ops, I was like, huh, it won't actually let me download it from here. I'll have to go get it from my own region. So I did. That usually works. Unfortunately, this time it didn't, even with both things on my Australian account. It still wouldn't work until I launched the game from my Australian account, and then went and played it on my American account. Don't ask me why they force you to do this, and don't ask me why they ask you to download like 3 separate things when just 2 would do, but that's what they decided to do. It's a little bit strange, but I did manage to get some time in on all 3 main modes. I have played on, I have played both, all 3 of campaign, Spec Ops, and multiplayer, and I'd like to tell you all about them in turn. We'll start with the campaign, because that's where I started with. It's got a bunch of different difficulties on it, obviously. One of which is realism, which I kind of appreciate being there, where all the bullets are super deadly to both you and the enemy. I, however, played on Veteran, because that's how I usually go about these things, and folks, don't play on Veteran. It really isn't worth it. The amount of times that you'll get your ass handed to you before you even know what's going on is just way too high. And there are a couple of situations in the campaign where you'll be playing, and you'll die by something, and then as soon as you respawn, you'll hear an audio clip that says, "Watch out for the so-and-so that you just died from, you idiot." Well, I won't call you an idiot, but that's what it feels like. It will kill you, and then it will immediately say to you, "Hey, watch out for so-and-so." But yeah. So it is a reboot of the Modern Warfare canon, but it does have a lot of fan baiting, and I think that's one of the main reasons I didn't like it so much, because they bring in Captain Price, obviously, very early on, and he's a main character in the story, and he still has that little streak of being a sort of, I put the line where the line needs to be in relation to crossing said line. He's that sort of dude. That was some embarrassing misses right there. I've actually got the footage on in the background as I'm watching it. Yeah, he still has the old sense of, I put the line where the line needs to be about him, and he's an interesting character. He's actually the most interesting character, because the rest of them are just generic, I do the job, and that's pretty much it. Sort of people that Call of Duty seems to have as protagonists these days. Which is kind of unfortunate. Oh, except for Nikolai, spoiler alert, he shows up. And then at the very end of the game, they have a cutscene in a tea house where it's basically them raffling off a list of names from Modern Warfare's original trilogy and saying that they're going to make Task Force 141. And then there's another cutscene that they actually showed off at the after the credits, where it says something along the lines of the story continues in Spec Ops, but it doesn't. Like, they don't actually make Task Force 141 in Spec Ops. They make an entirely new thing, which is unrelated to Task Force 141. So it feels like a real tease more than anything else. I'm not entirely sure what the point of that was supposed to be. But yeah, they feed bait you with stuff related to Task Force 141, and then they just do nothing with it, which really grinds my gears. It's obviously meant to be a sequel book, and they have said that they plan on making sequels to Modern Warfare in the form of like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3, but it's just kind of annoying, since I was mainly here for the, you know, I was mainly here for the sort of like reboot of Task Force 141, but they don't give you that until the very end. Instead, it's a completely unrelated story about some... It's actually kind of weird, because it implies that it says that the Russians are basically the bad guys through and through, to the point where they actually blame a war crime that the United States did on the Russians. And I find this kind of hilarious, because I'm absolutely positive that there are going to be some people who come out of the woodwork that say, the same people who are defending Call of Duty Modern Warfare for misrepresenting a war crime are the same people who said that Battlefield 5 is historically inaccurate for having the women's. I'm positive that's going to happen at some point. I am completely positive of it. But yeah. It takes on a really positive attitude towards the US, and even like the country that they invade. Not the country they invade, that the Russians invade, because most of this plot is spent in the context of you're following around a soldier from a fictional Islamic country called Uzbekistan, And this country is part of a terrorist attack on London. But throughout the entire game, well, this country, I say there's a terrorist group, but they are from this country. God damn it, why does my phone go off whenever I'm recording? It can never go off when I'm not recording. But yeah, this fictional group comes from this fictional country, and yet you are put with these resistance fighters who are both fighting this terrorist group and Russia, who have invaded their country. And it all becomes just this big blob of we're the good guys. And it's just strange to me in the long run how positive it manages to be, especially when you look back at, say, like Modern Warfare, it was obvious who the bad guys were. And even when, like, Russia and America were fighting each other as of, like, Modern Warfare 3, it was obvious that Makarov and his terrorist group was meant to be the bad guy in that sense. Instead, it just doesn't have any sort of, like, shades of grey whatsoever. It's obvious that the Russians are the bad guys because the general that is the main focus of this campaign is entirely nuts, and everyone else just seems to be an absolute set of good guys to the point where, as I said, they misrepresented a war crime, which is just ridiculous in my point of view. Didn't like it in Battlefield 5, don't like it here. Yeah, throughout the entire story, you know exactly how it's going to go down. The bad guys are going to get wiped the hell out. The good guys are going to, for the most part, make it. Someone's probably going to die in a heroic sacrifice. And that's pretty much the long and the short of it. The campaign is just a series of disconnected conflicts along the lines of this storyline, and that's pretty much it. In fact, they spend a fair amount of time just kind of spinning their wheels, more or less. There are a couple of things like taking over an airfield, and there's a couple of conflicts that happen in the country of Uzbekistan that legitimately do feel like the game is just spinning its wheels in its entirety. And I don't like those levels at all, because this game's main problem with its campaign is when it gets bored and just throws a bunch of dudes at you for you to shoot. That's the main problem with it. When they're introducing unique concepts like raiding townhouses, stealthily working your way around the bad guys' like personal villa, while being at night stealthily and trying to avoid things like patrolling technicals. And even doing little things like giving you little gadgets to improve the combat, like giving you little RC planes that you can fly in to take out an annoying group of enemies. That's when the game remains interesting, but all too often the game gets bored and just says something along the lines of, oh, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of dudes at you now. No interesting concepts, just kill them, if you don't mind. And whenever it does this, you can tell the game is clearly running out of energy, running out of patience with you. Excuse me. And that's the most disappointing part, because some of the most interesting parts of the game are when it decides to get interesting like that. Like, as I was talking about before, the raiding of the townhouses, they do it like a breach and clear from a, like a real-world military strategy, I say. But, yeah, there are a couple of moments in this game where you're raiding houses, you're going in really quietly, you've got the night vision goggles on, you're pacing the hallways really slowly, you're breaching individual rooms and taking out one or two targets at a time, and it is infinitely more tense than anything that the game puts up along the lines of, like, just go and shoot a bunch of dudes that are swarming in at you. And I absolutely loved the level where you have to stealth around, try and alert as few people as possible, and try and get to a bunch of hostages while not being noticed. And they give you a bunch of silenced weapons to do this. Again, I love these little segments because it shows they've got real creativity. But then you run into levels like the furnace level, where it's literally just dudes being thrown at you time and time and time and time again. And it just gets boring. That's the main problem with it. The enemies rarely change. They are just dudes that you shoot. there is one part in the game at the very end where they send in a Juggernaut from the original trilogy. You're seeing a bunch of them right now on screen, I'll get to that. But at the very end of the game, they send in a Juggernaut, but it ends up feeling way more contrived because he's got a ridiculous amount of health. He can kill you by basically looking at you. And the only way to really effectively kill him is to deploy an annoying environmental obstacle and just run around and shoot him and then run the fuck away. And of course, every enemy in this game locks onto you like you are the pile of shit and they're all flies. So even when you've got 5 or 6 like resistance troopers or marines around you that are just trying to shoot them, every enemy in the game has this annoying tendency to lock onto you, so you have to hide behind cover, peek your head out, and take a shot before the incredible knockback from taking a hit is enough to kill you. This is a thing that the game does all the damn time, and it was one of the major problems with the original Modern Warfare. I'm really annoyed they didn't decide to fix it for this one. But yeah, the majority of the campaign is you just facing down waves of troops, and that is its biggest issue. It doesn't really seem to matter where you are or how you're doing it. That just seems to be the way that it goes. Whenever it gets creative, and whenever it gets clever, it is enjoyable. But for whatever reason, they just don't do it often enough, and it just kind of runs into the same problem all the other Call of Duties have, where it gets really boring really quickly. What else is there to talk about? The story itself is just, as I said, it's not really that interesting either, because you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are, there's no shades of grey, it's literally just go kill them, and I can kind of understand why the Russians might be a little bit upset about the way they were portrayed in this game, to the point where Sony decided not to sell the game digitally on their store in Russia, because, God forbid, like, every Russian in this game, which amounts to like a couple of them, are displayed as utter, just straight up assholes, and when like someone like, say, Captain Price decides to torture a dude for the good of the mission, it's displayed almost entirely as a good thing. You are given like a neat little opportunity during the torture segment to take a shot at the innocent people, but it turns out that your gun isn't actually loaded. And it kind of makes an effect on the scene, which again is, while of course it is a little bit disturbing, it is also a really neat idea, although when he does actually give you the bullets, you can't actually shoot the innocents. They don't actually let you do that. They do let you shoot the guy, but they don't let you shoot the innocents because, well, obviously. But still, Sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought there. I'm very tired. I've been meaning to get this out for days, but every time I try and get this recorded, I get stopped. I get delayed by something. It needs to get done, and it needs to get done now. But, yeah. As I was saying, whenever Captain Price does something, it's displayed as good, and whenever the Russians are do something, it's shown as utterly evil. And it just feels weird at the end of the day, because you just end up in this weird situation where it feels like that the game is kind of screwing with you, in the sense of showing us as the good guys and them as the bad guys all the time, instead of showing it in real shades of grey. But then again, that is Captain Price's character in a nutshell, so, you know, whatever. But yeah, I definitely understand why the Russians might be a little bit upset, especially when there's a Islamic terrorist group. Well, they don't really describe them as Islamic, more like anarchist. I think that's what the loading screen tips are meant to imply, because you don't really get to learn much about, I think it was Al-Qatari, I think that's the name of them. You don't get to learn much of them throughout the game and what exactly they are. Most of the stuff you learn about them comes from like loading screen tips, including like quotes. It always feels a bit weird in these games where they take historical quotes from really notable figures in world wars, and then they stick in a bunch of quotes from characters in the game, and it feels like high school writing level in comparison. But that's a thing. That is absolutely a thing. will tell you one thing though. The cutscenes are excellent in their technical capabilities because, good lord, they look good. Like, it is the closest that we've come to overcoming the uncanny valley in a video game. That is, like, incredible praise for any game, let alone Call of Duty. They seriously look like humans. You can tell immediately when it swaps from cutscene to gameplay because it just starts to look that much worse, but the pre-rendered cutscenes in this game are absolutely gorgeous. That's pretty much all I have to say on that matter. But yeah, that seems to be my overall review of the campaign. When it gets creative, it gets good. When it lets you do things like sneak around someone's guard, or you get a death from above segment, but it's like 30 seconds long and nowhere near as satisfying as the original game. You get segments like flying around RC planes. You get segments like calling in airstrikes to help you out, like in the previous Modern Warfare. I think that was in Modern Warfare 2, I think that was a thing. But yeah, when they let you do little things like that, it gets creative. But when they get bored and just throw waves and waves of soldiers at you, it gets really boring really fast. And that is the main problem with the Spec Ops, which is the footage that you've been watching for the last 20 minutes. The Spec Ops is something that I was hoping would be entirely different, but here's the thing about what Spec Ops is in the original trilogy, or rather 2 and 3, I should say. Spec Ops was a series of timed missions where they were basically like little mini campaign missions which put you in really small situations and challenge you to get through them as fast as possible with whatever weapons you could get. They would usually lay out like a massive selection of weapons and only start the mission once you went past a specific point. A couple of the more notable ones were Modern Warfare 2, where you got to do like Modern Warfare 3, where you got to do the bridge crossing. I loved that mission. Modern Warfare 2, where you got to damn it, I had it in my head for a second and then just it's gone. The scene inspired by the Rock, where you were in the prison and you had to escape through like the showers and you needed like a thing that they did in the campaign, but that let you try again in the special ops mode for your best time. That mission was awesome. And there were a bunch of like really good ones as well, which aren't particularly like memorable, but still enjoyable to try and get high score times on. They've completely upended it in this version, in the Modern Warfare reboot, and I hate it. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I absolutely hate it. It's the worst part of the game, but you've seen basically why. They are more or less missions set on these really big maps with some objectives that you can attack from multiple angles. And you have to do like 3 or 4 of these objectives like in a row. The missions end up feeling really damn long. Like they are stupid long sometimes. Like they can take upwards of half an hour only to end up failing at the end anyway. They do have that same sort of thing going on where you approach them, you can approach them in a sort of time attack sense, but considering that you need 4 people to actively succeed in these missions, it means that you kind of need to coordinate 4 people, and unless you've got 3 friends who are all relatively skilled at the game, I don't think you're going to be coordinating anything. So yeah, these missions are now co-op. They are now entirely co-op, and you have to play them in co-op. There's no way to play them solo, and frankly, you wouldn't want to, because the way these missions are designed are incredibly boring. So, and not to mention really, they're almost impossible to balance for single player, because you will be surrounded by enemies. As soon as you let off a single shot, you will be surrounded by enemies. They will charge in from every direction. There will be dozens of them, and you will have to fight them off. I left in the, for the most part anyway, I left in the kill counts, so you can see just how many enemies we had to kill off during the course of these levels, but they will constantly stream in. they will just attack until you get to the objective, at which point they will either continue attacking, in the case of the ones where you have to stand around and wait for files to download, or you will have to, or they will just like go away and they'll let you go to the next set of objectives. That seems to be the long and the short of it. Rinse and repeat 4 or 5 times, and that's basically the entire mission set in a nutshell. But the constant swarming of enemies is just incredibly frustrating to deal with, because they eventually become way too numerous to deal with. So unless you're constantly moving forward, which is kind of hard considering, even though this isn't like veteran level difficulty, it's still around hardened level, so you can go down pretty fast. But still, there are a ton of enemies that just swarm you from every direction, and there really isn't that much you can do about it, because you'll just be constantly surrounded and constantly trying to shoot everybody and move up. And it's not really helped out by the fact that they're constantly dropping in juggernauts. Like, as soon as you start one of these missions, you'll be seeing juggernauts, and they take a stupid amount of ammo to take down. If you don't find, like, an RPG, or if you don't take an RPG in or something, you will have a really hard time trying to take down juggernauts, and in certain places, they'll be more than happy to toss 2 or 3 of them at you at the same time. And there is no way for you to deal with that. If they are all surrounding a single objective, you are basically fucked. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You are fucked, you have to run away. It makes the game really frustrating. There's not much you can do about it because the enemies are just constantly swarming. Some of them are guaranteed to be juggernauts, and you basically just have to run through and hope for the best. And that is pretty much every one of the 4 missions that they include. Yes, despite the fact that the missions are really long, they're like 20 to 30 minutes, they take place in these huge open areas. Oh, one thing I will say about these huge open areas is that they feel like they're prop gen. If you don't know what I mean by that, I feel like they mean they're levels that you play in a roguelike. They don't feel like they're really well designed at all. I was in the first mission thinking to myself, am I playing on a level that was generated just for this? But no, they're the same level. They just feel like they're really poorly laid out. Like, someone just plopped them down on a map and just went for it. Nothing like the sort of, like, really straight line design that you're used to in like a regular Call of Duty campaign map, or just the sort of like very specific design you see in like a regular Spec Ops mission. No, it feels entirely like this was plopped down at random, and as I said before, the enemies that just constantly spawn in don't help with this at all. So it definitely does feel like the levels are prop gen. They don't feel like specifically designed at all for this game, which is disappointing, to say the least. But yeah, there are 4 missions overall. At least now. They say more missions are coming later on in the year. And next year, I should say. But yeah, the 4 missions they put in right now all feel very similar to each other, to the point where I just picked one at random whenever I was just like going through them to try and play around with them for this video, really, because by the time I had fought my way through Spec Ops, I thought to myself, this game isn't worth keeping no matter what the other modes are like. But yeah, there are a couple of things they do to help you along. Like, there are character classes that have active and passive abilities. The one I played the entire time, just as an example, was the Medic, who has the ability to get people up faster, and who has the ability to get people up faster and just revive everyone as they're down. So if all 3 of your teammates are down, you can pop the ability and everyone gets up. That's pretty much it. Also, note how long it takes me to die here. Because when I turn around, it's a Juggernaut! I don't know why it took me so long to die to a Juggernaut, but that's just how it works, I suppose. And I'm just down here. There's not much I can do. It's just a really frustrating mode. Then there's the second side of things. Like, you have you have a different kind of mode called Classic Special Ops. And I was hoping that this would be closer to the original Spec Ops. Like, tightly designed, really small missions, built around the idea of time attacking and really nice performance. Also, that's a bug right there, where I went right through the floor. But yeah, the Classic Special Ops, when I played them, they're basically just the same thing as this. I got put on part of a campaign mission map, the Highway of Death mission, and I just had to survive for as long as I possibly could. They just flowed in enemies around all sides, and I had an infinite supply of consumables. I just had to grab everything and try and survive as long as I possibly could. I tried playing it solo, and I never got further than 2 minutes after several retries. It wasn't worth the effort. It really wasn't. They say that it's meant to try your skills with specific sets of, like, equipment and kill streaks. But all they do is just toss a bunch of guns on the floor, don't let you pick up any of the enemy's guns, and just tell you to go for it. And it's not fun. It isn't anywhere near as fun as the original Spec Ops setup. And that was entirely disappointing to me. I was really hoping they would pull through with something half decent for Spec Ops, because if I'm being honest, Spec Ops was my favorite part of Modern Warfare 2 and 3. Just bite-sized missions that they could recycle parts of the campaign from, meant around perfect execution. It was clearly like the evolution, I should say. I was having trouble finding the right word there. The evolution of Mile High Club from the original Modern Warfare. Small missions, really difficult, based around being precise. Spec Ops just feels like it spilled its guts out, and you have to clean them up. It's like playing 52 pickup. It's just boring. With that said, let's go on to the multiplayer, which I am lukewarm on, for a few reasons. One is that the netcode doesn't feel great. I think it feels better than some FPSs I've played recently, but I still definitely feel like I'm behind on a few things. Now, I love playing SMGs, so my first gun in this was the P90, and there are absolutely moments in this game where it will absolutely screw you with the netcode, right? It will just be like, oh, you fired off 7 bullets in this guy's direction before he somehow managed to instantly land a headshot on you and kill you. It's definitely not going to look like that in the kill cam. Yeah, the latency and just netcode of this game in general is really bad. Just by default, it is terrible. And it really doesn't work well at all. And I'm willing to bet it's got something to do with the netcode. Last time it was, like, in Black Ops, they definitely had the tick rate for the servers really low. Also, this video footage appears to be really bad. I don't know what's gone wrong with this footage, but it seems to be dropping frames all over the place. The game wasn't like this. For the performance of the netcode being bad, the actual performance of the game, I never felt it go below 60. I was never able to physically tell it was able to go below 60, and I'm usually pretty sensitive to this sort of stuff, so it's pretty optimized on the PlayStation 4 Pro at least. But yeah, back to the multiplayer side of things. The netcode is really poorly done, and it has screwed me over a lot of times. So yeah, I don't know exactly what to tell you about that one, but I'm hoping they fix up the errors that they made, because it's just not great right now. And I find myself being frustrated because, strangely enough, I love playing hardcore. I love playing hardcore team deathmatch, hardcore domination, basically hardcore anything, because it appeals to me way more than a traditional gameplay, because it means everything is just that much deadlier, and it's a lot more enjoyable to me personally. But the netcode screws you over way more in that mode. It absolutely does, because you need to get your shots out first. And when your shots getting out first are limited by the game's absolutely horrific netcode, it just doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. Alright, sorry, back on topic. The second thing is that if you try and play a Call of Duty game and expect your teammates to actually be good at it, not gonna happen. There are way too many people who play modes like Domination, Cyber Attack, and Headquarters like it's Team Deathmatch. Even in hardcore. Like, there was this one particular scum fuck who I played with in hardcore Domination. And all he did was stand around and play, and just like stand in the corner and just like wiggle around in a circle and just stay there. He was the main reason we lost the game, but I'm not entirely sure how the hell he managed to get a 5-kill streak, but he did, and he called it down on us, our teammates, and he killed like 4 of our dudes in one shot. And it pissed me off to no end. Like, man, I absolutely hate it when people do that, because it's Call of Duty, I gotta say, at the very least, because that is something that Call of Duty is known for, and they are out in full force again. There are just fucking dullards that will not play the objective, that will not work in any particular mode's favor, and I hate it. Third thing is how they feel the need to split up the game's multiplayer playlists. I was not a fan of the way the game split up the playlists in this title at all. So, let me explain to you what I mean. So, in the main menu, you have the option to go into Quick Play, which then lets you filter a bunch of modes in and out. So, for example, you can filter out Team Deathmatch, Free-for-all, Domination, Cyber Attack, Headquarters. I wasn't able to play a single game of Headquarters in this, by the way. Despite the fact that I had it selected every single time, it was always all the other modes, which, again, kind of sucks. I wish I could make it so that I could prioritize certain modes, but it's obvious that Team Deathmatch is going to remain the most popular mode in this entire game, like, forever. That's pretty much going to be the entire thing, right? Which sucks. But they also go to the effort of putting other modes outside of this quick filter, so you can't match for absolutely everything. So, even weirdly, they doubled over from some of the modes they included in the filters. So, they had Cyber Attack in the quick filter, and then they had Cyber Attack as just a completely different playlist that you could match for. And there is 0 point to that whatsoever. Go all one way or all another. Have it be all separate playlists, or put them all in one quick filter and let you search for them all one at a time. For all the faults that Titanfall 2 had, one of the best things you could do in that game was match for every single mode, or a subset of modes that you felt like. In this game, it's half and half, and it feels really pants-on-head retarded because of it. Especially when some of the more interesting modes, like Ground War and Realism, can't be matched for in the quick filter. You have to match them separately, which I don't understand in the slightest. It feels entirely against the point. Especially since you can't play, like, Realism in... You can't play Realism in the quick filter, which I'd love to see from time to time. Just drop in Realism as like a... Just drop in Realism as like a random option. I would love to see that, but it just doesn't seem to be a thing. And so, therefore the matchmaking in the multiplayer feels kind of silly. It seems entirely against the point of having the quick filter system in there in the first place. I like some of the modes they got going on. Like, I like Headquarters. Ground War is also pretty interesting. And everything in hardcore feels pretty great. But I feel like the one thing that really lets this game's multiplayer down, just in general, is its map design. So, in modes like Ground War, for example, where the maps are unique to it, this doesn't seem to be a massive problem. But again, they just end up feeling like Battlefield, because they're just big, sprawling, filled with random buildings, objects, and what have you. But in every mode that has to share, like, anything between 6 through 6 and 10 through 10. 10 versus 10 and 6 versus 6, I apologize. It feels like that... It feels like the maps were just designed with chaos in mind. Absolute chaos. Especially maps like, Saint something, I can't remember its exact name, and Piccadilly. Those two maps in particular are the worst maps I've ever played in a Call of Duty game. They feel like just absolute chaos in every single match that I've ever played. You can't get more than a couple of steps without running into an enemy who just shoots you in the face. There doesn't seem to be any precise idea of where the spawns are. They swap constantly. And I just find myself, like, being really confused on those maps every single time I spawn, because there doesn't seem to be any particular, like, direction or design to them in any sense of the word. And it's really frustrating trying to play those two maps specifically, and they come up a lot. Every time that Piccadilly started to come up, I got really annoyed. I just quit, and I waited like 30 seconds and hopped back on the matchmaking again, so I wouldn't have to play on Piccadilly or the same one that takes place in Russia, because those maps are just absolute chaos. They don't seem to have any sort of rhyme or reason to them whatsoever. And a couple of the other maps that they've included just aren't great. Like, they aren't particularly amazing. Like, the one that takes place in the sand caves, it's not particularly notable. The one that takes... Gunrunner is a decent map. And there was one other they included in the beta, which wasn't particularly great either. But at least they work. And a bunch of the 10 versus 10 maps kind of have the same problem. But they have the 3-lane design, which is pretty, you know, which is a thing that Call of Duty's had for ages. But the 3-lane design is so out and out obvious that it makes the maps boring to play on. And it's not great for, like, Call of Duty gameplay where the time to kill is really high, because you end up needing to go through, like, an open area sometimes, and when you do, you just get your face shot off from someone who's on the other side of the map. Seems to be a pretty big and obnoxious thing in this series, and the 10 versus 10 maps, just all the ones I had time to play anyway. I was on, you know, quick filter, and when you're on the quick filter stuff, it'll drop you into 6 versus 6 and 10 versus 10 maps without so much as, like, saying, do you want to be on 6 versus 6 or do you want to be on 10 versus 10? So it was kind of random what I had time to play. But it still feels like the, it still feels just weird. The maps just kind of feel weird. My personal favorite mode, Gunfight, has most of the maps that we saw in the beta, plus a couple of new ones, which I thought were fine. Like, it's not hard to get a Gunfight map right, if I'm being perfectly honest, but Gunfight still remains my favorite mode in, like, basically the entire series at this point, because it still manages to remove all of the pluses and minuses, all of the minuses, I should say, that Call of Duty has. Like, being killed from behind, having enemies spawn behind you, having kill streaks, like, interrupt the flow of the gameplay, having all of these things, right? They're all basically gone from Gunfight, and it encourages, like, smarter play. Because if you don't play smartly against the enemy that you're going up against, you're going to lose. And the main mode of Gunfight so far appears to be the mode that was originally in the alpha, where you both get a preset set of weapons, and you have to use them as effectively as possible against your enemy. And it always gets interesting when they give you, like, a Kar 98K and a shotgun, and they tell you to go for it, because you don't know what the enemy's going to have. Do you want to risk getting close with a shotgun? Do you want to stay afar and see if you can spot them first with your Kar 98K? Those little decisions you need to make when it's 2 versus 2 are always interesting. And basically, Gunfight is like the only mode that I have no complaints against whatsoever, and if someone turned it into a completely different game, I would probably play the shit out of that game, if I'm being perfectly honest. If someone managed to make a half-decent game out of just Gunfight, you bet your ass that I would be playing that, like, beyond belief. Yeah. The experience system is actually something that I approve of, because from what I've heard about it, I didn't max level, and frankly I didn't feel the need to, because in this game max level actually works quite differently. There's no prestiging anymore, and the maximum level is actually going to work like a battle pass. So every season, your battle pass level will, your prestige level, I don't know what they're going to call it, but every season your level will reset, and you get to work your way back up again, which seems like a better way to go about it than just having like the race to platinum, which is, you know, annoying, at least in my personal opinion. Not platinum, sorry, the race to, what's it called? The race to, Prestige 10, whatever it is it ends up being. Because it just ends up being annoying in multiple ways. Mainly due to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Mainly due to how the game, locks you unlocks. So every time you prestige, you lose all your unlocks and you have to unlock them all again. In this game, that's probably not going to be a problem. You're just going to be able to play through your battle pass ranks without losing everything you just unlocked and finding a setup that you're comfortable with. Especially when, like, I really like the MP5 as a gun, but I barely got to use it in this, like, footage because it didn't unlock until I was like level 15 or something, but you gain your initial levels like really quickly, so you're actually unlocking stuff at a pretty quick pace, so it's not as big a deal as it is with other Call of Duty titles, which I appreciate. It's also worth noting that your unlocks carry over between Spec Ops and your unlocks carry over between Spec Ops and multiplayer, so you bring your multiplayer loadout into the Spec Ops co-op variety, but, well, it doesn't actually give you kill streaks. In Spec Ops, you just end up having, like, munitions that you can find in the field and spend before you go and hop in, but you'll end up spending your munitions, like, really quickly. So you just find yourself thinking something along the lines of, oh, you'll just find yourself thinking something along the lines of, oh, I can carry that into Spec Ops? That's kind of neat. And the weapon modding system is back as it ever was, but they actually made this a fair bit slower by giving you things like camouflage and stickers and dot sights that you unlock instead of, like, actual attachments. So it takes a while to get your gun the way you want it, which I don't really like. But at the same time, your weapon still levels up relatively quickly, so at least you'll have things like a sight really early on. And I still like being able to customize almost every part of your weapon and making it like, I say uniquely yours, but like making it do things that you want it to do. Like, do you not want to worry about, like, aiming down sight speed because you're using an SMG with really tight hipfire recoil? Then focus on things that give you better hipfire and increase your aiming speed. Just little things aiming down sight speed, because little things like that I really appreciate in games like this, which let you form your own strategy and your own little loadouts. I enjoy things like that.
We're holding two. We have the advantage.
But yeah, it's just, with the map design the way that it is in this game, it really seems to be the main thing that's screwing the multiplayer over. Not to mention the netcode and the people who can't seem to get their head out of their ass in terms of things like actually playing objectives and stuff like that. Because when all 6 players are firing on, I say all cylinders, but you know, when everyone is actively focused on the objective, this game can be fun. Especially in game modes like Headquarters, but it's mainly the map design that does it in, I think, because none of these maps are even remotely memorable. And a couple of them are just so outright terrible that I outright leave games if I see them. Because screw dealing with some of this shit, man. Like, screw it. Maybe they'll make like some of the spawns better so that the maps like flow better overall, but it's just disappointing if I'm being perfectly honest. Because none of the maps are really that memorable. They lead to like problems with the netcode, problems with the spawning, problems with basically everything in the game can be kind of rounded up to maps.
Lost the lead. Friendly UAV on station.
And that seems to be my main issue. And everything else just kind of suffers for it. It also means that gunfight remains one of my favorite modes because they have to design maps around 2 versus 2 gunfights. So you have to be very specific about the way you go about things in gunfight. And it just makes me appreciate gunfight all the more. Well, I've been at this for 50 minutes. I think I've said everything I want to say. I really do like Call of Duty. I didn't go into Call of Duty hoping to hate it. I thought it was going to be better, but I mean, I liked Advanced Warfare better than this. If I could get Gunfight just as a standalone thing, that would be all I play. Oh god, the footage is just going to shit. I need to figure out what's going wrong with my video encoding because the stutters like that are just... The stutters like that aren't my video recording kit, it's my PC. I don't know why my PC insists on doing this. I'm gonna have to figure out what the problem is with that, but... Yeah, it's just... I'm not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I thought the campaign was at best lukewarm because of the amount of times it gets bored and sends you back to just deal with annoying waves of enemies. Spec Ops sucks so much ass because all it is just enemies flooding in and you having to deal with them for pretty much every single mission objective for way too long missions that give you like no checkpoints or like no chances to breathe, more or less. And multiplayer carries on some of the same problems, introduces a couple of new ones, and doesn't really have that much in the way of interesting maps, so I'm feeling pretty lukewarm on it as well. The only bright side to it is Gunfight. And Gunfight is just, like, Gunfight is not worth keeping this game around for. Gunfight is not worth paying a full $60 US or... Actually, I didn't pay that much. I paid $69 Australian because games tend to go on discount if you don't buy them from, like, the local EB Games. Like, to give you an example, buying Call of Duty Modern Warfare from our local EB Games, which is GameStop to you people in America that watch my videos, buying games from EB Games will usually be something like $99 or $109. In Big W, which is one of our like major shops, it's like $69. Nice. So I don't think it's worth that much money. I'm gonna go and take it into my local EB Games because they'll probably give me trade-in value for it, which is like, you know, which will be more than enough to justify at least having played the game for the hours I have, and I'll probably use it to buy something else like Steam credit, because I can't for the life of me figure out why I would keep this around. I didn't enjoy the campaign that much. I don't think it's got very much replay value, unlike Modern Warfare, the original trilogy, which I find myself replaying sometimes. Spec Ops is just waves of enemies being thrown at you with no design, care, or attention, and multiplayer is, as always in the Modern Warfare games, kind of sloppy. There's just problems that feel like that should have been figured out years ago. And the funny thing is, these people made Infinite Warfare, so I was hoping that at least the campaign would be better, but... Because I actually played the Infinite Warfare campaign thinking to myself, I'll try it, because these guys made Infinite Warfare before they made Modern Warfare, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I'll just go and see what Modern Warfare and what Infinite Warfare was like, so that I can try Modern Warfare and think to myself, I can get an idea of what Modern Warfare's campaign might be like. And I thought to myself, well, what, Infinite Warfare was actually really good. I really enjoyed Infinite Warfare. I'm kind of surprised by that, actually. So, having it be so disappointing, so at best lukewarm, and just utterly uninteresting in the long run, is one of the most disappointing things about Modern Warfare. Because one of the worst things a game can be these days is uninteresting. It can be, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be really bad to be laugh-worthy and be enjoyed that way, or it can be really good and just legitimately enjoyed. But this is just sitting straight in the middle, where I see potential, but a lot of things are just wrong with it, and they need to be fixed. Like, for Modern Warfare 2, be Modern Warfare 2. Have your multiplayer be closer to Modern Warfare 2. Have your Spec Ops be basically Modern Warfare 2. Have everything be closer to the original Modern Warfares. Instead of, like, doing the Spec Ops thing where you're going your own way and it just doesn't work. Or having it be, or just playing multiplayer and still having the same issues that you always had. Try innovating, try doing something different, try making Gunfight a bigger attraction maybe, but yeah, overall, I am disappointed. I would not recommend Modern Warfare. You do have some other things I'd like to say, like you do have bots that you can play with, but I personally don't care. You do have things like, they are promising to update the game for free with more stuff like maps and stuff like that, but this is Activision we're talking about. I wanted to get in before the microtransactions really settled in, just to give the game a go as it is on launch, because that's always when Call of Duty games are best, you know. I wanted to do all of that just to see what the game was well and truly like before it just well and truly went to shit. I'm happy I did, but at the same time, I'm not going to hold on to it. I guess I'm just going to, yeah, as I said before, I'm going to go dump it off at my local EB Games and just pick up something else, because at the end of the day, I don't think just Gunfight is good enough to be worth it. I really am disappointed. I apologize for the hour-long rant. It seems like I have, I apologize, it just seems like I can't keep my shit on straight right now. Hopefully you got something useful out of this. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say. I'll leave you with the rest of the footage I recorded, although it's probably just going to be as bad as the rest of it. I am sorry about that. I did remove I recorded like 2 hours of footage. I removed a fair few matches that were like, you know, terrible by my standards, and this particular last one actually has a real twist ending on it, so, you know, when it goes right, and that's always what I've liked about Call of Duty. It seems to, like, whenever everything goes right, when there aren't campers, when there are people who are actively playing objectives, when the map design isn't actively trying to screw you over. Like, I played Call of Duty Mobile recently, and there was one mode I really liked in that game that I think would actually do better in this game, which is Frontline, where it's team deathmatch, but everyone always spawns on one side of the map. They don't swap sides or anything like that, or swap your spawns depending on where everyone is. I wish that mode would make its way to the console version somehow, because that is an ace idea. Just having everyone be locked to one side of the map, but yeah. Whenever everything is working good in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, it's enjoyable. Unfortunately, that does not happen very much at all. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.
Get those positions. We've got Alpha. Radar depleted. Enemy personal radar online.
Enemy at the cargo containers.
Enemy cluster strike incoming. Take cover. Enemy UAV overhead.
Enemy in the woods.
Securing C. We captured Charlie.
Enemy at the shipping area.
Enemy personal radar online. Securing Bravo. Enemies at Alpha. Go. Enemies have Alpha. We captured Bravo. We're losing Bravo.
Enemy at the minecarts.
Enemies at Bravo. We've lost Bravo.
In the woods.
Enemy cluster strike incoming. Take cover. Enemy UAV overhead. Enemy personal radar online.
Enemy in the woods.
Enemy holds 2 objectives. Take them back.
Enemy at the minecarts.
Enemy cluster strike incoming. Take cover. We're halfway there. Here's the
Enemy
fight.
at the barrel.
Okay.
Reloading.
You've lost the lead. Friendly UAV online. Securing A. Losing C. We've got Alpha. They're taking Bravo. We've lost C.
Enemy in the minecarts. Enemy at the cargo.
They're taking Bravo. Enemy holds 2 objectives. Take them back.
Enemy at the minecart.
Taking Charlie. Stand by. Enemy UAV overhead.
Enemy at the warehouse.
We've got Charlie. Enemy at Charlie. Taking Bravo. Stand by. Losing C. We're done. Enemies have Charlie. Friendly UAV online.
Contact!
Enemy personal radar online.
Reloading.
Personal radar drone standing by.
Enemy at the minecarts.
Copy. Falcon 301 route for personal radar coverage.
You're needed at Alpha. We're holding 2. We have the advantage. Taking Charlie. Stand by. We've lost Alpha. We've got Charlie. UAV ready for deployment.
Falcon 3-0. Good copy.
Enemies in the area!
UAV beginning flyover.
Building 2-0, good copy. Cluster strike away.
We've got control. Securing A.
UAV is out of fuel.
Enemy personal radar unlocked. 2 objectives secure.
Code flash out!
Enemy personal radar online. We're losing Bravo. Enemies have Bravo.
Contact!
Securing Bravo. Securing Alpha.
Enemy at the shipping area.
We're holding Alpha. We are dominating the enemy. We're losing Bravo. Enemies have Bravo. Enemy personal radar online.
Enemy in my
Losing Charlie. We're crushing them. Stay with it. We've lost Charlie. Friendly UAV online. Assist your team at A. Charlie. We captured Charlie. They're taking Bravo. Friendly
Enemy
sentry
at the
gun
train
deployed. Allied cluster strike inbound. It pays to win.
For fuck's sake. For fuck's sake.